I gave people all the stuff they really needed. Social Security checks, utility bills, TV guide.
I want a TV guidance counselor. TV guidance counselor. Staying up to watch all night, and everything's gonna be alright with my TV guidance counselor.
Hey everybody, welcome to TV Guidance Counselor. I am Ken Reed, as always, your TV Guidance Counselor, and we are barreling through the end of the year. Only 2 more episodes left, 1.5 kind of. The first of the year is a Wednesday, before we get into 2025 and year 12 of the show somehow. I hope you guys are doing okay. I'm on my way to a dentist appointment. No problems, just a cleaning. A simple cleaning so that I can sound nice on the podcast. The two things have nothing to do with each other. Anyway, I'm babbling. This is the show where each and every week since Valentine's Day 2014, I've talked to an interesting person about classic television using a back issue of TV Guide magazine for my personal collection as the inspiration for our conversation. And this week is no exception. My guest is the fantastic Daniela Taplin Lundberg. She is a producer. She also has her own podcast called Hollywood Gold, where she interviews people from all over the history of Hollywood. A lot of producers, just some really fascinating stuff. If you're a movie nerd like I am, you will love it. It is the Hollywood Gold podcast with Daniela Taplin Lundberg. And I had such a great time talking to her. We are kindred spirits, I'm sorry to say for her. She's very similar to me in that we even have the same birthday, but we discussed that here. Anyway, you'll enjoy this. So please sit back, relax, and enjoy this week's episode of TV Guidance Counselor with my guest, Daniela Taplin Lundberg.
TV is my friend, and it has been always there for me in time of need.
Live via satellite, Daniela, how are you?
I'm so good, Ken. It's so fun to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
You're quite welcome. I'm happy to have you. We share a similar love, I think, of television and film.
Yes.
Although you come from a legacy of that world.
I do. My parents were all sort of involved in the film business in some way. I say parents. My father was a producer. He produced Mean Streets, which was Scorsese's sort of first big film. He had made one before it that wasn't as successful and discovered De Niro. And my mom was an actress, first generation, educated, went to college and came down to LA. And she was most well known for being in La Bamba. She was like the mother in La Bamba, Richie Valens' mother. And my stepfather was a writer-director, and I spent a ton of time on sets of his sets. And my most favorite memory was being on the set of Major League in Milwaukee. So that I was destined to do this. I fell in love at an early age.
Oh, also, we share a birthday, by the way, which is...
No way! You're born June 28th?
Yes. So it's us, John Cusack, Mel Brooks, Gilda Radner. We get the good day.
Oh my God! We're like spiritual siblings.
Yes,
that's amazing.
Exactly. It's because I bring this up because you grew up in LA, and the issue you picked here from July 20th, 21st to the 27th, 1990, is kind of an interesting issue being a young person growing up in LA around that time, because it's TV's top teen stars. I imagine that's why you picked it.
I just like the cover art. I loved Kurt. I think Kirk Cameron was on there maybe, and like Doogie Howser. And they just appealed to me at that time. Although, it's so funny, Ken, I went through the actual lineup of primetime, and there's some real desert like days for me. There are days where I was just like, oh, I hated watching TV on Monday because there's nothing for me.
But the funny thing is, if you're like me, you probably still watched it anyway.
Oh, totally. I mean, I was totally familiar with all the storylines and the characters, but I was just like, oh, I've got to watch Murphy Brown. Okay.
Right. Major Dad, I guess I'll watch it.
Totally.
Yeah.
I hated Coach, but I would watch it in between like Roseanne and 30-something.
You and me seem to be the only people who hated Coach.
I guess so. I mean, everyone loved Coach, but it just wasn't made for me, I don't think.
I'm not a sports guy, and I call it a show where all the characters are this dumb guy. like the dumb guy side character. I'm like, all 5 of them? Really? That's too much. It's too much.
They're all dunderheads except for Coach. I know. It's so true.
It's very weird. And I don't know, have you ever seen the movie Action Jackson?
Of course I have.
Where Craig T. Nelson is the kung fu evil villain.
Wait, who is the lead of Action Jackson? Is it Apollo Creed? Is it?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
Why am I forgetting his name? He died last year.
How dare we forget his name?
Yes, Carl Weathers.
Carl Weathers.
Yes.
Carl Weathers. Yeah, that was like his big swing. He was going to be a big action star, and it didn't quite work.
Yeah, it's I when he died, I read an interesting thing that his cameos on Arrested Development, if you recall.
Yes, I recently watched those episodes. Carl Weathers teaching David Cross how to act. Oh my God, it was so good.
And he had that running gag that he was really cheap.
Yes.
And apparently that was his idea.
Oh my God.
So they asked him to do it, and they wanted him to just be kind of like I don't know, like I'm a badass action star. And he was like, that's kind of cliche. Wouldn't it be really funny if I'm like really cheap and like taking creamers and sugars from places and stuff? And they were like, okay.
It's so good. It's funny because it's true. Like I've seen out of work actors who are like going to these events to get a free lunch. Like make no mistake, that is a real thing.
One of my stand-up friends, I think he coined this term, but he called it Hollywood poor, and he was saying it in direct reference to the fact that he was about to go hiking in Prada boots, and the only reason he had those boots was because they let him keep them from a shoot, and they were the only boots he had.
That is so good. That Hollywood poor is such a thing. And by the way, we've experienced it in my household. Like a lot of like the thing with Hollywood is like it's feast or famine. Either you're working or you're not, but there's nothing steady about it. And so we were either like living high on the hog, like eating at Toscana and Brentwood, or we were just like really like tight. It was all tight. So I'm very familiar with that. But you know, I've produced several movies that like do these awards campaigns, and they used to throw like really fancy lunches and all this stuff for the movies, you know, to get campaign voters out and to get to see the film. And what I noticed was it was a lot of really older voters, because once you were in, I don't know if this is the case anymore, but once you were voted in, you were in for life.
Right.
And so there'd be like, you know, a lot of like 87-year-old actors who were like in the talkies who had come for a free lunch and had no intention of like seeing the film. They did not want to see Beasts of No Nation. They wanted like a free chicken, you know? But I really appreciate all that because it's tough. It is a really tough business, man.
I worked for Biograph, and sure, I'll watch The Baxter.
Yeah. I so appreciate that reference, by the way.
You're quite welcome.
That's so good.
Yeah, it's you know, it's a very funny, odd thing. And, you know, since doing the show for the last decade or so and getting to know actors and producers more, I realize how much of a blue-collar business that it is.
Yeah.
And it's a very uniquely weird one because not as much behind the scenes, but you're extremely blue collar. It's feast or famine, but everyone assumes you're not. So it's kind of like 100%. You're a carpenter and you're like, there's no one's building anything. It was like, I saw that house you built. You're friggin' rich.
That's
it's like, no.
100%. That like you hit the nail on the head. And, you know, totally, to be frank, like you know, my husband works in private equity. You know, I've made 30 plus feature films. I've like suppressed my fee so often that I could not live off of my work alone. I couldn't sustain my family. It takes like a 2-parent household to do this. And so I really do appreciate like everyone who's so committed to the industry and living through this really, really just difficult time.
Yeah, it's particularly
where
bad
no one
now.
knows what they want anymore. So,
but
tough.
then, you know, Francis Ford Coppola, what did he go bankrupt 3 times? And it was to make The Godfather and Apocalypse Now.
Oh my God. Well, I do this podcast, Ken, my own podcast called Hollywood Gold.
Yes.
And I interview producers and directors and writers. And I interviewed Fred Roos, who, may he rest in peace, he was Coppola's longtime producer. And we talked about, one of the movies we talked about was Apocalypse Now. And just that process, literally taking 3 years, first of all. But Coppola just, mortgaging his house, like, going crazy, losing 50 pounds. I mean, just the extent he went through to make that film. And, I have to say it's one of the great films of all time. And so was it worth it?
Maybe.
Probably, but man, I don't know if I could have done it,
Yeah, I recently had Alex Cox on, and Repo Man's one of my all-time favorite movies. And Alex is just a brilliant guy and done some amazing stuff. But he was basically saying he's on his third script for Repo Man 2. He's had to rewrite different scripts because, people aged out of it. And he's like, I had this movie budgeted for $2.5 million. I own the rights free and clear, and no one would greenlight it.
No
and he's
way.
like, and I, that's like, I can't raise that much through like a crowdfunding, and he's like, it's really a paltry amount, but it's like, it's people don't know like slam dunk stuff. They're like, nah.
That's so crazy.
It's nuts. It's
Poor Alex Cox.
I know. He just finished his what he's calling his last movie, which is it's a Western version of Gogol's Dead Souls, and the script is amazing and it looks really cool. So
wow.
Happy to see
that
it.
Sounds nuts.
Yeah, it's
cool.
Yeah, and he had a really good Francis Ford Coppola story, but I'll spare you. I'll show you later.
Okay, well I'll just have to find it.
Yeah, I could tell you after. The listeners will be bored. But yeah. So this is all about the teen actors. It's very, very interesting to me because grew up in Boston. This world seemed a million miles away.
I noticed the TV guide was from Boston.
Yes.
So did you physically keep all your TV guides? Like, how do you have a record of all these?
So growing up, it was the first thing I read. So when I was little, I think I was like 3, and I started reading TV Guide every week from cover to cover.
Could you read?
Yeah, I read before I talked, which was a strange.
So you're a genius.
Thing.
Okay.
I don't know genius. I think more weirdo.
I get it.
So believe it or not, this is a true story. I didn't have a first word. I had a first sentence, and the first sentence I said was, and my parents thought they were like, oh, he's not talking, whatever. My mother changed the channel, and I said, can you put that back? I was watching it. And on stage I would joke that her reaction was like Joe Beth Williams in Poltergeist when the chairs are stacked up. It's like, what? So it was like that. So
totally. It's like in The Sixth Sense when all the doors are open.
Yes. She's like, what?
Yeah.
I used to pay for my own subscription, and I would read it cover to cover. And I was also such a movie guy that at that time, the movie guide in the back of TV Guide with all the stars and reviews and, who directed and stuff, it was kind of the only place you could get that. I explained it to people younger than us. Like, we didn't have IMDb. Like, you had this ragtag collection of TV Guide indexes.
Totally. Until Premiere Magazine, that was sort of it.
Yeah. Which was nuts. And then, and I later paid for Premiere and Entertainment Weekly. Those were like my, scraping to get these together. So so I saved, so the sort of 80s, 90s ones are mine. And then when I started doing the show, people started sending me stuff, and there were,
oh my God, that's so cool.
So much cool stuff. There were 2 libraries who were getting rid of their physical periodicals. So I also have like a complete run from like Nebraska and Maine, but, a bunch of people who worked for TV Guide have sent me stuff. So I have like TV Guide, You Worked Here 20 Years watches, and they used to have TV Guide boys, which were like newspaper boys that sold TV Guides, and they had these specific aprons with the little pockets, and I have one of those. I have some cover art. Oh, like this. Someone sent me this. The listener won't hear this, but I'm a big Kate and Allie fan, so they sent me this. It's like a Kate and Allie drawing from CBS.
Oh my God.
Tons of stuff like
Jane
that.
Curtin, just such a genius.
So good.
They both were. They were so good.
It holds up so well, that show, too. It's like pure
I bet
character.
it does. It's like, that's one I really liked. I would always watch. I would always stop. I would stop on that, and I would stop on Bosom Buddies.
Yes.
If those were on, I would just be like, this is going to be good. They have such a good dynamic.
There's a famous story there's a Boston comic who, when we had this boom in the 80s, and there was a lot of like the Lenny Clarks kind of guys, who was offered a role in Bosom Buddies and was like, I'm not wearing women's clothes. And they were like, but it's no. And he tells people this story to this day like it makes him look good.
Oh my God, that's too funny.
But there's a lot of Boston comics who tell stories that they think makes them the hero of, when you're like, why would, what? Like,
and then Tom Hanks went on to be Tom Hanks.
Yes. There's a guy who got a featured extra part in what's the Jimmy Fallon, Drew Barrymore,
Fever
Red
Pitch.
Sox? Yes, Fever Pitch. And they were like, because there's different sections set in like historic times in the Red Sox. And he goes, and I showed up and they were like, hey, you got to wear this Red Sox thing. And instead of the one I was wearing, I was like, I'm not wearing other people's clothes. And I got out of there. And I'm like, this isn't a good story for you. I don't know why you think that.
Why does that make you look good?
Yeah.
That's so funny.
Not good. So the weird thing here, well, there's a really cool picture of maybe the coolest picture ever of Doogie Howser where he has 2 squirt guns like James Bond.
If Neil Patrick Harris doesn't have that framed in his house, there's something wrong.
Or like a full door, like a door to his office. That's just that picture.
The squirt guns. It's so true.
It's fantastic.
It's like Octopussy, but with Doogie
it's
Howser.
like, I'm a doctor and I got guns. Take that, James Bond. So it's this interesting story about kind of an interesting snapshot of, teens in TV shows. And when I think about 1990, it's such a weird transitional year that the cynic in me feels like this was sort of the last era of Hollywood kid that was a real kid, meaning they weren't sort of groomed to be actors,
Yeah. That I feel like that is right. There is like and it's funny because, a lot of these kids were sort of slightly older than I was or my age group. And so I was like 13, 14 around this time. And so I felt very connected to this cover because it was like I was connected to these kids. And a lot of the shows were long running. And so you sort of felt like you were growing up. Like the Cosby Show, I grew up with that show. I mean, like, I know it's not PC to say that, but that was
a great show, though. Like, regardless of him, it was a great show.
And I watched every single episode every Thursday night. And then when A Different World came on, it was sort of like they were echoing where I was going. And so I so appreciated like Lisa Bonet having her own spinoff, even though it didn't work for very long. But I just loved that like they sort of captured my development, So Thursday nights I always felt like really hit home for me. That was my favorite night of television for sure.
Yeah, especially because you had Family Ties then too. And I love Different World so much. I say it ruined college for me because it set expectations that could not be met.
Oh my God, they were just so clever and they were all so different. But they all were like best friends. And I just like love that notion too. It totally ruined college where you end up going to a place and just being friends with like a homogenous group. But I really did love it so much. And it also, my mom, it's so funny. My mom was best friends with Debbie Allen, who ended up like, directing a lot of those episodes and just being highly, highly involved in A Different World. And so we went like once or twice to set. And that was just the coolest. I mean, like just going on those sets, you don't realize how small they are. And like, you think the outdoor of the cafe is actually outdoors. Right. No, it's a set. You're on a stage. And I just remember having like a very romantic notion of that time. I like babysat Debbie's kids and Felicia Rashad's kids. And like, that was like my growing up in LA. Very weird.
But that didn't ruin watching the shows for you. Like that being shown behind the curtain didn't
not at all. I felt even more invested for sure. And so, yeah, we kind of went on a tangent, but
no, it's all right. Oh, I'm all about tangents.
Love those two.
All about tangents. A few years back before she passed away, I had Ann Beats on, and I had kind of forgotten how involved in A Different World she was. And sort of when the show at the beginning was sort of not going in the direction they wanted, they brought her in to show run it, and she kind of
interesting.
It's really interesting talk because I was a big square pegs guy as well.
Me too. I love Square Pegs.
So good. Yeah, she's
Sarah Jessica Parker. Oh my God, I'd love to see some episodes of that.
That kind of holds up. There's a really, really great two-parter Christmas episode that's very good. Although I had Devo on the show, and they were talking about how they're the crazy new wave rock band, but they were like, oh, the kids on that show were out of their mind. They were all on coke. They were all crazy.
Really?
Yes.
Like even SJP?
I don't think SJP was.
Yeah,
but,
she was so young, right?
Like Jamie Gertz and everyone else, which I think she's talked about. But they were like, we're this crazy punk new wave band, and we're like, guys, calm down. Like kids.
Who else was in Square Pegs? I remember Jamie Gertz and her.
Jamie Gertz and her were the big names. The other three leads kind of quit acting after that. The only other name, Bill Murray was in 2 episodes as a substitute teacher, which they made and do.
I love that you know that. Oh my God. Yeah. You are a savant.
She told me that Lorne Michaels, infamously, very strange guy, big ego. And she says he got that show canceled. But then she goes, it was my fault because we had a cover story in Rolling Stone and I was really proud of it. And I was at a party with Lauren and I mentioned it to him and I took a flight back to LA. And by the time I landed, the show was canceled. And the editor of Rolling Stone told me Lauren called him and all he said was, you know, when I was in the magazine, we weren't on the cover. And that was it. It's like, oh, that's horrible.
No, wait, who? Jamie Gertz told that story?
No, Ann Beats, because she was a former SNL writer. And she said, it was my own fault for telling him.
Oh, I know, be careful.
It's like, poor Ann Beats.
Yeah, hubris. Hubris is a dangerous thing, man. Even brief moments.
So another weird thing before we get to the listings is there's a, right after the teen thing, there's a vote, 900 number voting thing. Who is the most beautiful woman on TV? TV Guide lets you decide.
That is so funny. Who won that?
Weird. I don't know who won. I could probably look it up. Felicia Richard's on the list. You could have voted for.
She was so beautiful.
What a weird. It's just a
She was not winning in 1990 though.
No. But it's such a weird mixture of people from all different, like all the Twin Peaks women are on it, obviously.
Yeah. Northern Exposure was also, I realized, was this time. Like that actress, what was her name? With
That's
the pixie haircut?
Janine Turner.
Janine Turner. She was such a dish. She was so beautiful.
Oh, yeah. That show was great.
You know who else I was realizing? Beauty and Linda Hamilton. Remember Beauty and the Beast? Before Terminator 2, feels like, right?
Yep. It was between the two Terminator movies. Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Ron Perlman told me that most people didn't know what he looked like out of makeup there.
I'm sure.
And he was on set once out of makeup and some of the crew was like bad mouthing him. And talk about like what an asshole the guy who played Vincent was, and he like joined in and they had no idea.
That's so good.
It's like, there you go.
That's so awesome.
So then let's get to the listings here. I did notice for the listeners, the regular listeners, this particular issue for some reason has a distinct lack of cigarette ads, which is highly unusual for TV guys.
Oh, is that right?
Yes. There's normally every other ads for cigarettes and
it's so funny. I also noticed there was an ad for a show called Monty or something.
Yes.
That was a new Mayim
Bialik. Pre-Blossom.
Pre-Blossom, post Beaches.
Mm-hmm.
What was that show? Do you know?
It was a mid-season replacement that they dumped in the summer. So we're in July. So a lot of the weird shows we're seeing are like just full-on burn-offs.
Why I chose July, where there was like no new episodes of anything. I don't know why. It was just the cover art.
The other thing though too is like as kids, like the summer, even though it's repeats and stuff, that's when I think we get to like watch the most unfettered TV. Like you can stay up all night if you want.
So true. That's a good point.
And you're not working yet. So, but yeah. That was a show. They tried to give her a lead in a show. This was right after she had previously been a regular on Webster. And they tried to do a backdoor pilot from Facts of Life. The final 2 episodes of Facts of Life, Blair bought Eastland Academy. And the premise of this show was that she was now the head owner of the academy, and there was a new group of students. And the students were Seth Green, Juliette Lewis, Mayim Bialik, and one other person. And then it didn't go. It just didn't go. And then this was her show right after.
That would have been an amazing show.
Yeah.
Who was the showrunner of that?
So that was, I think the last season they didn't have anyone who wanted to like run the show. So I'm a huge fan of backdoor pilots because I just love that concept of how insane it is.
So smart.
And Facts of Life had the most backdoor pilots of any show ever. And the final season of Facts of Life had 7 backdoor pilots.
So what were some of the shows from Facts of Life's final season?
One of them was none spun off. One of them was Natalie moved to New York and shared an apartment with Richard Grieco, David Spade playing a med student who has a dramatic scene in this backdoor pilot, which is hilarious.
No. Stop.
He comes in and he's like, I lost my first patient today. And it's like this whole, it's poor David.
No.
Like,
and is it a half hour?
Yeah, half hour. There was that one. There's one where another one that they try to spin off with Natalie where she is running a Mexican restaurant. There's one where Joe was in charge of this like youth center with Paul Provenza for like troubled teens. They tried to make that one.
Sure.
It was none of them worked.
Oh my God.
The desperation of like, we can't let this show die.
Did Facts of Life and Different Strokes ever have like interplay?
Yes.
Is that my memory?
Yes.
Is that okay?
So Facts of Life was a spin-off of Different Strokes.
Of Different Strokes.
And
okay.
the first season of Facts of Life, which was a mid-season replacement, it's that first season with like Molly Ringwald on it and the larger cast. It did not do well. So when they brought it back to like, let's give it another shot for a full season is when they brought in Joe. But they also had Arnold come in like 2 episodes because they're like, yeah, this'll do it. I mean, it worked, but weird crossover.
And was Mrs. Garrett in Different Strokes?
She was their housekeeper. She was their first housekeeper.
But was she Mrs. Garrett in both or different?
Same character. It was like, Mrs. Garrett's leaving to be the nutritionist.
I love this forensics. And I love that you're like a human AI. Like you just have all the information. Oh, this is so fun.
Useful to almost no one, but there it is.
No one. Just email you questions.
It's funny. I have had people who are like, will email me like actors and be like, what was the thing I was in? What I did? When was that? And I'll be like, it's this. And it was then. And they're like, thank you.
That is sick. Ken, have you been on Jeopardy or anything?
No. I have been on trivia teams and stuff. Although I have some gaping holes in my trivia knowledge, which are like sports and anything.
But like any TV film stuff you could probably answer.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. TV, film, comics, horror movies.
Starting in like what year? Like, could you go back to like the 20s?
Oh, easily. Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
But that's one of the things they talk about on the show a lot too. Like those of us that grew up sort of pre-millennium, we got this amazing education of Hollywood history just because it was cheap. So they would air movies from the 20s and we'd see silent stuff and a little just because they were like, this costs nothing to air.
Wow.
Which is
that is so crazy.
Shows how much I had.
Do you remember Elvira, like on Sundays? Like Elvira would do like, she would host like Sundays. What kind of movies was she showing?
So that was Movie Macabre. And Cassandra's a friend. I love her so much. And that story is nuts. It started as a local LA show. It was local on KTLA. And she would they would buy these packages of syndicated films. So a lot of these movie studios would say, we got 40 movies. 2 of them you want. We're going to make you buy all of them and you have to air them once or whatever. So a lot of times they would just air them in the middle of the night for just some revoiced Spanish movie. Almost every market decided the best thing to do was have a horror host and make a feature out of them because we got to air them anyway. So LA's was Cassandra was the Elvira. And so she would show a lot of things like a lot of Spanish movies, a lot of 70s Spanish horror movies that this guy...
Like in Spanish. They were in Spanish.
A lot of them were dubbed by this guy, Gordon K. Murray, who had this idea where he was like, I'm going to buy all these Spanish movies. I don't speak Spanish, but then I'll just redub them based on what I think the plot is of this movie.
No way.
So the best worst one he did was a movie called Santa Claus from 1968. And it was a fairly high budget Mexican movie, but it's weird. Like basically Santa spends this whole movie fighting the devil.
Oh my God.
It's a kid's movie. So it would be stuff like that. A lot of Mexican vampire movies and then a lot of British stuff as well. So Hammer Pictures had an anthology series called Hammer House of Horror that were hour-long things, and they would sell them to syndication as movies. So she would show those a lot as well. Oh my God. Just cheap stuff.
Every question I've ever had, I could ask you right now.
You could.
Is so incredibly exciting.
Feel free.
Oh my God, this is so cool.
So that's, and then her first national thing was she was on TV's Bloopers and Practical Jokes. They did a segment about horror hosts.
Okay.
And they were like, she's the LA one. Obviously, she stands out. And from that appearance, she got, I think it was Bud Light ads, Halloween stuff, and then the show went nationally syndicated.
Oh my God. So did she make a nice amount of money?
She did and didn't. So that she was at war with the network for a long time because of who owned the rights to the character. She eventually got it back. Also, there was an issue where Brendan Tartikoff, NBC produced one theatrical movie ever, and it was Elvira, Mistress of the Dark. And she wanted to make a movie, and he wanted her to do a TV show, and she was like, I want to do a movie. And he was like, you know what? NBC will try to do a theatrical movie.
No.
And they did. NBC Pictures produced Elvira, Mistress of the Dark, and which is a great movie. She wrote it with John Paragon, and the three of them had written Pee-wee's Big Adventure together. And it's fun, and it just didn't. No one cared about it. And NBC Pictures was like, we're going to stick to movies, stick to TV from now on.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
What a cool idea, though.
She eventually got the character back and has been able to make a good living off it. But when she was first doing the KTLA show, she was a runner for the Midnight Special, the rock concert show. She was literally like a gopher on that show. Wow.
That's so cool.
Just like,
that is so cool.
Make it work. So let's dive into Saturday night. What'd you do?
Let's do it. Okay. I just wanted to start off, Ken, by saying that Pee-wee's Playhouse before we get into Saturday night was hugely significant. And even as I got older, I would like try to watch it, even though it came on kind of late on Saturday. I just thought it was the weirdest, coolest thing. And I couldn't believe they like let it on network television.
Yeah.
It was just kind of perverse and bizarre, and I just thought it was so cool.
And it's the 80s alternative art scene, like downtown LA warehouse scene.
Yeah.
All over that show. Gary Panter, Wayne White, Rob Zombie was a designer on that show before he was in a bit. Like just bizarre aesthetic. It's so great.
So weird and cool. So anyways, I just wanted to highlight that.
Yes.
Saturday night. Okay, so I'm a freshman in high school, maybe eighth, getting into high school, should have a social life of some sort. So I do, like, when I'm looking through this, I'm like, if I was at home on Saturday night, I was watching Beauty and the Beast.
Yeah.
Linda Hamilton, which I would be kind of only entertaining a little bit. Like, I didn't think it was like that great of a show. It was sort of slow moving. I thought they had a very perverse, weird romance, which I enjoyed. So that would be my selection for Saturday night.
Weird show because it was a fluke, and it was the first time networks realized they could market primetime shows specifically to women.
Yes.
In fantasy shows, because that was always the like guys like Star Trek, it's nerds, whatever. And they took a chance with that, and they were like, women like this weird fantasy too. And they were like, no way that'll work. And it was this huge fluke hit. Yes.
So I would say that. And then that was sort of the era of SNL that Mike Myers was like my SNL. Like he was my God. And I thought every character he did was kind of amazing. And so SNL, even though it was in reruns, it was like Dana Carvey, Mike Myers. I thought Victoria Jackson was super cool. Phil Hartman was so funny. I thought that was like a really good group, actually. Yeah. I loved Chris Farley so much. I thought he was an absolute genius. I'm not sure he was on in this year, but
he started in 93, so this was a little bit early.
Okay, little later. Okay. So this is maybe a hair early for like my proper era, but just wanted to note that.
Yeah, this is the Kathleen Turner, Billy Joel episode rerunning, which is a really funny episode.
Okay. So who else were like the big stars at this moment? Was it like Kevin Nealon and like...
Kevin Nealon was sort of not a B player, but wasn't one of the main stars. This was like Dana Carvey, Phil Hartman, Victoria Jackson. You still had people who were held over from John Lovitz I think was his last year.
John Lovitz, okay.
And you still had like Nora Dunn was on. But then 1990 was when you got like Chris Rock was a featured player, and Ben Stiller was a featured player for a few episodes.
Spade? Was
Spade had just started. He started as a writer, and they would let him do Weekend Update stuff. So we would come on every now and then. So the next season, 91, 92 was when we started to get like Adam Sandler, Sarah Silverman.
Like really, that was I thought like another like golden era.
Yeah. It's when that sort of what became the sort of alt comedy scene people who had actually started here in Boston, a lot of them, David Cross and Sarah Silverman, and those people sort of migrated to New York, and then Adam Sandler, and then a lot of them got on SNL as either writers or performers that time.
So cool. Okay, then Sunday night, well, as we both recall, Sunday night was not like hot television back then. No. There wasn't like Game of Thrones or anything. It was kind of a wasteland by my interpretation. Also, I would always have to do homework.
Yeah.
So I would watch Life Goes On, if anything.
Yeah.
And that was like a 7 p.m. show. Do you remember that show, Our House?
Yes, with Wilford Brimley and Shannon Doherty.
Wilford Brimley.
Yeah.
And
Chad Allen?
Deirdre
Hall.
Deirdre Hall. Well, I was pretty into those two shows. I felt like they were family oriented. There was enough for me. So I liked that.
Dramas too. And our house had their most controversial episode, you may or may not remember, was when a kid had a squirt gun and some cops killed him. Do you recall that episode? They were running around the neighborhood with guns, and this cop was like, "Put it down!" and shot him. And it was this whole episode about like gun violence, and like it was very weird at the time. So
weird. Corky
was, yep. Life Goes On.
Corky. And then who was the older middle sister?
I'm trying to remember.
Becca?
Kelly.
Oh, this Kelly. Yes, her name was Kelly.
Kelly something. I can't remember the name of it now, but I thought she was working on SAG.
Did you ever hear that Jesse Plemons was described as the perfect combination of Matt Damon and Corky?
No. But that checks out. That checks out.
Okay, so that was really Sunday night for me. Monday, another wasteland. Unfortunately, I should have chosen a better TV guide, but I just chose this one. We've already established.
Yeah, this one gets
Monday, I also felt was kind of dry for me. The only thing that I sort of circled was Murphy Brown, which I would watch. But like, I was never into designing women. Like, I wasn't into that lineup really too much.
It was very adult, and I don't mean like sexy. I mean like adult.
Yeah.
But I was kind of
fun.
No, I was kind of a diehard CBS Monday night person because I love Kate and Allie and I love Newhart. Those are like my two favorite sitcoms.
Okay. You know what? I feel like I should watch Newhart now because at the time I just wasn't. He was like a 60-year-old dude. It wasn't appealing to me. But I know what a genius he is. I probably would love it now.
It's so funny, and it's. My theory is if a show goes more than 5 seasons, it inherently starts to get weird because they're like, we ran out of stuff to do. And that show is a prime example. And the last season, almost the entire writing staff are the people who then the next season did Get a Life, the Chris Elliott show. So,
God.
David Merkin,
are you serious?
Everybody, David Merkin, all those people wrote for the last season of Newhart. So that last season is almost like a Get a Life season. Like there's really bizarre episodes. There's an episode where Bob Newhart and all his old man friends form a street gang. Like there's just like weird.
No, stop.
Yeah, it's hilarious and weird.
Oh my God. Because I thought Get a Life was so good.
It's amazing.
It was so bizarre and weird, but it was only on like 1 or 2 seasons?
A season and a half. Yeah, they retooled it for the second season, brought in Brian Doyle Murray. Yeah.
I always thought Chris Elliott was like such an unsung hero. I kind of loved his reemergence in Schitt's Creek.
Oh, yeah.
And then he had like a little part in Something About Mary, but I always thought he was so much funnier. Was he in any of those Was he in Living Color or any of those shows?
SNL. He did 1 season of SNL.
He did one season of SNL?
But he wasn't in
like The Kids in the Hall or anything like that?
No, he was on Letterman. He was a writer for Letterman. So Letterman...
Yeah, okay.
He's the only writer Letterman let him be in sketches and literally would go, Chris, do whatever you want. Like him and Adam Resnick, Letterman would let them do whatever, and Letterman wouldn't want to know what they were doing. He'd be surprised. So if you go back and watching those sketches, like where Chris Elliott's playing Marlon Brando, or where he's the guy under the stairs, Letterman is so trying not to laugh because one of my favorite ones is Chris Elliott comes up from the stairs and he's like dressed as a ghost, and he's going, "Give me my ring back," and then Dave goes, "Chris, what is this? It's kind of weird." And he goes, "It's science fiction, Dave." And he's like having this weird conversation. It's just so funny. Yeah. And I loved his father, Bob Elliott, who played his father on Get a Life, was of Bob and Ray, who are Boston guys.
Bob
and
I don't
Ray.
think I knew that. Well, the daughter, Abby, right?
Yes.
She's so funny.
Yeah, both of his daughters.
Great.
They both have done stuff. Bridey also
they
does
both
stuff.
are actresses?
Yeah, Abby was on SNL, but Bridey's been writing stuff. She wrote a movie a couple years ago.
Yes. I've heard about her, actually. I think I got a script that she wrote a while ago that I can't remember. But that's right.
Like third generation family. There's
so cool.
I don't know how Bob and Ray haven't had this resurgence of like alt comedy people loving them, because they were so weird and funny. They did a pilot essentially for an SNL replacement show when Lorne Michaels was going to leave, and it was called Bob, Ray, Gilda, Jane, and Lorraine. And it's Bob and Ray and then the women from SNL, and it's a 90-minute sketch show, and it is so much funnier than anything that was on SNL in 1978. Like, it's hilarious.
No way.
Good.
You've seen, like, you have that?
Yes.
Like, have you seen those episodes?
Yes.
Oh, that would be so cool.
And it's so funny and weird and just, it's great.
How cool.
So it's, they're
okay.
a legacy, another legacy family of talented people.
Yeah. Okay. Tuesday was a really great night, I thought, for me. It was Who's the Boss, which is like Samantha's kind of getting older, so she's getting into real issues.
Yep.
Wonder Years I absolutely loved. Loved Kevin. Loved Danica McKellar.
McKellar.
Roseanne, before it was called something else.
Yep.
Just Roseanne. She was like not political yet. She was just funny.
Great show.
We established I do not like Coach, so I had to suffer through a half hour until we got to 30-something, which I oddly liked.
Loved it. 30-something and Sisters were shows I watched as like a young tween.
Loved Sisters.
Why did kids like those shows?
Were we the only kids who liked those shows?
Maybe. I'm like, oh, these people might lose their house and then they got cancer and they're going through a divorce. Like, why is that interesting?
I loved me some Marshall Herskovitz.
Yes.
And, I just thought like the writing was so sharp. It was a world I kind of wanted to live in.
Yeah.
It was aspirational, but not too much. I thought everyone was just cool. I had a huge crush on Peter Horton. Was that the blonde-haired guy's name? Mm-hmm. He was so cute.
Of Children of the Corn fame with Linda Hamilton.
Oh my God. Yes. The redhead was so funny. What was her name?
Oh,
quirky best friend.
Yeah, I can't. Was it Swoosie Kurtz?
No, it was another redhead. Not Annie Potts. It was a third redhead.
I'll think of it later.
Anyways.
Yeah, Herskovitz did you ever see the first made-for-TV movie Herskovitz did?
No, what is it called?
Oh, man. It's called Special Bulletin, and it was from 1983, and the premise is it was presented like an actual news broadcast, and during the course of this news broadcast, some terrorists steal a nuclear weapon, and it goes off. And so people freaked out. Because, between the commercials. They thought it
was real? Yeah. Like it was like a Ray Bradbury?
Like a War of the Worlds kind of thing.
War of the Worlds kind of thing?
But they didn't mean for it to be that way. Like between all the commercials, they're like, this is fiction. But like from a storytelling standpoint, they're like, this is a really interesting way to unfold this story. And it's really well done. But people lost their mind.
Was it who starred in it? Anyone you can remember?
No one you would really recognize, which is part of the point, because they didn't want people to be like, that's not a newscaster, that's Peter Horton or whatever.
Right.
And it's really well done. It's very, very good.
Can I ask you another question?
Yeah.
What era was where the Hollywood stars would come out for games and they would
Battle of the Network Stars.
Battle of the Network Stars. Yep. What era was that?
So that started in 76 and it ended in 89. 89 was the last year.
Wow.
And I've had a few people who were in it. Actually, Olivia Dabo from the Wonder Years, she's a friend, and she was in the last ever Battle of the Network Stars. And an interesting thing I learned was it wasn't for charity. If you won, you got paid more. Which is why Dan Haggerty...
So they were very motivated.
Yes. So like Dan Haggerty, when you're like, wow, he's taking this real serious, it's like, yeah, he is.
No way.
Yeah.
I mean, back to that, like, you got to earn a living.
Yeah.
That is so interesting.
Which is, when you look at the mixture of people they have, it's just starting out actors and people sort of at the tail end of their career, which is the people who are like, I'm going to get this friggin' $5,000 for beating you in this boat race.
I just remember them in like short shorts and crop tops, like even the guys. It was just like the outfits were too funny. But I guess that's like a precursor to like real world road rules challenges and stuff. But I really enjoyed those. That was a good time.
It was fun to see people from the different networks interact as well.
Yes.
Like CBS versus ABC. Oh.
Also this notion that like all the networks could sort of like work together in a way. Yeah. Like they were all like in their own lane. Like CBS was for older people. Yep. You know, like everyone was sort of like doing their own thing. And not necessarily totally competing for the same audience because it would kill them all. Yeah. I would love to see a little like Amazon, Netflix, Hulu, network star.
I wonder who the people would be that were on those, because I think of that in like Circus of the Stars, which was a similar kind of thing. Right. And
like everyone takes themselves so seriously now. They wouldn't do it.
No, I don't think so.
It's so boring.
And also, like, I think the insurance people would be like, we're not letting you tame lions. Sorry.
Right. Right.
We're not going to let you do a tug of war.
But I just wonder if anyone would do it,
Probably. But it would probably, again, be those reality TV stars, because they're like, this is what we do.
Right. Totally.
Instead of like people who are like, I'm an actor. But who knows?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's my Tuesday. Really happy on a Tuesday. Wednesday.
Oh, can I mention one thing in that Who's the Boss episode?
Please tell me.
Mona. So Who's the Boss had 2 spinoffs actually this season as well. One was a Mona pilot and one was Living Dolls, where Samantha and Leah Remini become models. But
oh my God.
This is when they're trying to build up Mona's character a little bit. So they have her get a visit from her dead husband, played by Ephraim Zimbalist Jr.
Who is that?
He's like an old Hollywood actor who is kind of like a big name star in like the 40s. It's like a really weird person to have on Who's the Boss.
He comes back like as a ghost?
Yes. I don't know. It's like he gives her new insight into her relationship with Angela. But again, at more than 5 seasons, show gets a little weird. Dead husband's coming back to tell you about your daughter's relationship.
God, I can't believe Who's the Boss. So how many seasons was Who's the Boss on? Was this the last season?
No, it went from 84 to 92. So I think it was 7 seasons. It started the same season as Growing Pains and ended the same year as Growing Pains.
So do they have syndication money like Seinfeld has syndication money? Like is Tony Danza and Alyssa Milano doing very well because they went that long?
And no. So yeah, like Seinfeld hit that. Seinfeld and Friends hit that perfect Venn diagram of you negotiated better rates because like the Gilligan's Island people got screwed and the Brady Bunch people got screwed and Happy Days people got screwed. And you not only had UHF stations, you had basic cable. So you would be airing like twice on TBS, twice on all the local television. So you were making like 4 times the amount of syndication money. So that like late 80s into the 90s people made the most money. But then, Tony Danza also had Taxi money and Alyssa Milano has Charmed money. Which that's still in syndication. That's on TBS like 40% of the day.
She may have even done better on Charmed.
Yeah, probably, because she would have been able to negotiate like a bigger thing.
And how many seasons was Charmed?
9.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
That's crazy. Is Charmed a spinoff?
No, it was a brand new show. And it was, again, they were like, let's make a show. It was sort of in the wake of Buffy. They were trying to figure out shows for
Buffy. Yeah. And what was the other spinoff of Buffy that
Angel.
with David Boreanaz?
Yeah, Angel. Yeah, which was all showrun by ex-Roseanne writers, by the way.
Wow. That is so weird. That is so hilarious and weird.
Well, that's what's his name? Oh my God, why am I forgetting the guy that created Buffy the Vampire Slayer? Who's famous? Josh Whedon was a Roseanne writer. David Fury, like all these people, Ben Edlund, all these people knew people from that were stand-ups, and then they all went into that world later for some reason.
So interesting.
Very
strange. My God. Fascinating. Okay,
Wednesday?
Thank you for that.
Oh, you're welcome, yeah.
Wednesday, I went Growing Pains.
I love Growing Pains.
Okay, and then I would also flip to Unsolved Mysteries because I was like also interested in that. The host of that,
Robert Stack.
What was it? Robert Stack.
The Untouchables.
Yeah. My cousin loved that. My older cousin. So we'd like flip back and forth depending on if she came over. I'd watch a little Head of the Class. I always felt like that show could have been funnier.
Yeah.
Who was the teacher in that show?
It started off as from
the Irish guy.
Oh, that was Billy Connolly. He was the second teacher.
He was the second teacher.
Yes.
The first one was WKRP guy.
Why am I forgetting his name? But I had a couple of the kids on from that show, and he hated them.
Did he?
Yes, he was. Why am I forgetting his name? People know from WKRP, but he was kind of told, "This is your show. You're the star of this show." But it became evident halfway through the first season that it's a show about the kids, right? He's like the sage advice, but it's not a show about him. And he was very mad about that, which is why he left the second his contract expired, and they got Billy Connolly in.
He was better. I mean, I like Billy Connolly, but he was better. But I remember Robin Givens was like, that was also when she was like dating Mike Tyson or did soon thereafter. And so I would watch that.
Yeah.
I would watch that.
Brad Pitt was on it for a couple episodes.
Brad Pitt, yes. And they dated.
Yep.
I don't know if you remember that.
I do.
But that, and then obviously I'd watch a little Doogie, although I was never like a passionate Doogie Howser watcher for whatever reason.
I love medical shows, but for some reason, Neil Patrick Harris, I don't know why, I just didn't connect with his character. I was just kind of like, yeah. Whatever reason.
And I think he's really good.
Yeah, I recognize
better now, actually.
He's great in the show, but for whatever reason, nothing about the show. It's not like it's 30-something where I can really dig in.
Yeah, no, me neither. It's so funny. Did you ever see that interview with the show they do now with who's the big actor who's on Shrinking now?
From Freaks and Geeks, that guy?
Yeah.
I can't
Jeff,
think of his name. Yeah.
What's his name? Good God. It'll come to me. Anyways, the show they did together, the big show with
How I Met Your Mother?
How I Met Your Mother, yes. So they're being interviewed, and God, what is his name? Anyways, he had no idea that he was Doogie Howser. So they're being interviewed, and like they ask him, and they ask Neil Patrick Harris about like what his years as Doogie, and he's like, "Wait, who are you talking to?" And they're like, "Neil," and he's like, "Dude, you weren't Doogie Howser?" Like he had been working with him for 5 years and had no idea.
He is very different. This I just noticed. Wednesday night, there's a, again, because of burning off shows, right? There's a burning off a pilot as a made-for-TV movie on Fox for a show that didn't go, obviously. They're airing it on July 25th, 1990 on a Wednesday. But it's a show called Glory Days. And this is about cops. And one of the cops is an aspiring writer, and he's played by Brad Pitt.
No way.
Yes.
Oh my God, I would love to get my hands on that.
I've never seen this. I should see if I could dig this up. Yeah.
Did you ever see that show, or it was a movie, and it was Ricky Schroeder and Brad Pitt play brothers, and they're runners?
Yes.
And Ricky is actually faster than Brad? Mm-hmm. What was that show called? It was called like Cross something?
Yeah, it's not The Loneliest Runner. That was that Michael Landon one. I can't think of the name of it, but I'll remember.
Ricky Schroeder was kind of the like hard scrabble, like had been in trouble with the law, and Brad Pitt was like the straight arrow. And I had crushes on both of them. I was a big Silver Spoons person.
I was too, and then I loved It's Your Move too, when Jason Bateman got his own spinoff, but as a different character.
Well, I made a movie with Jason Bateman. And he would tell Silver Spoon stories, which were that like Ricky Schroeder would be really mean to him. Yeah. He and Alfonso Ribeiro, and like Jason would have to like, I think maybe Jason was a little younger than they were, and he would have to do more tutoring than they would, and like they would always like tease him and throw balls at his trailer and stuff like that. And I was like, oh my God, poor Jason Bateman, because he comes off as the one who's like
he's the smarmy,
super slick and like clever and like. And so that was like so sweet to hear. Oh yeah,
I've heard nothing but good stories about him. And John Houseman, who played the grandfather Stratton, who was on the Paper Chase and in The Fall.
Yes. Oh, loved him. Thank you for reminding me of what like a treasure that guy was.
So good and funny, and apparently just like a nice
guy. I have to
watch
watch The Paper Chase again.
Paper Chase was fun in a weird way.
Okay, so that's Wednesday. Okay, then Thursday we sort of talked about obsessed with Cosby Show, obsessed with Different World. Also, when Family Ties was a part of that lineup, obviously would watch that. And for whatever reason, my mom hated television. Like, she hated when we were watching television. I was so obsessed with television. I always wanted to watch TV, and she was always trying to shut the TV off because she thought it like was killing my brain cells.
Which is so funny because, to remind people, she's an actress.
She's an actress. I know, it's like so ironic. But whenever I was like, Mom, it's Cosby Show, she would let me watch it. For whatever reason, she thought that was like a good, positive show for us as a family.
Well, it was seen as quality TV. It really was. It was like there's a lot of bad stuff about Cosby. But one of the other tragedies is that show, that ensemble cast is unbelievably good. The writers were unbelievably good. And so that they lose out on syndication money and they lose out on being able to be recognized for the great work they did on that show is...
It was so good. I can't believe Claire Huxtable never won an Emmy.
Yeah.
I can't believe all the kids were so good. The episode, one of my favorite episodes is when Denise tries to make the shirt for Malcolm Jamal for Theo.
Yes.
And he's going to a party.
But you believe those kids were siblings. It wasn't like they had that antagonistic, but like, we can make fun of each other, but you can't kind of thing that we didn't really see that dynamic on shows really often.
I know. It's so true. I loved it so much. I loved their like Brownstone in Philly. I just thought I loved the whole thing. So
one of only two sitcoms that shot in New York at the time, by the way.
Is that right?
Yep.
Because they lived here. That makes sense.
Yep. That and Kate and Allie both shot in New York.
So cool.
And the reason I figured that out as a kid because when I would watch the Macy's parade, which I always watch, it would be like the kids from the Cosby Show and Kate and Allie. I'm like, why are they always in the Macy's parade?
That is so funny.
It's because they're New York.
I loved those. I loved when like Cliff was going to try to buy a new car and pretended he was poor and wasn't a doctor.
Or the classic one where Theo wants to move out and he pretends to be the landlord and he has to. It's so good.
So good. They were so good.
Yeah.
Okay. So that was my Thursday. Cheers. Obviously, I'd watch a little Cheers, but again, it was just like there were such great character actors on Cheers, but it just like didn't speak to me as like a 14-year-old girl.
It felt too
it was like
old. Like it.
Yeah, but the best comedians like Woody Harrelson and Ted Danson and Kirstie Alley and I also love Shelley Long so much, but
it's a big Shelley Long.
George Wendt and like all those people were so good.
It's a show that I had to discover later in life because being from Boston, it was like everything was Cheers here, and it was hard to gauge that show was actually a huge hit everywhere because they were like, obviously they like it here, but I never really got into it as a kid. And weirdly, I went to college in London and had a really weird sleeping schedule, and they would air.
Where'd you go?
I went to Goldsmiths in South London, and
cool.
They would air Cheers like really late at night, and I kind of started rewatching it when I was like 19. I was like, this is amazing. Like, it was so good.
It's such good writing. It really is. But I just didn't appreciate it at the time,
and it holds up. Like, it's it holds up so well. And,
it is one of those sitcoms that people are just like, just give it a chance.
The thing that struck me was it's a show about alcoholism. It's a show about alcoholics. And the interesting dynamic is everyone's from all walks of life. You have, Frasier, who's a doctor. You have a mailman. You have a banker. And they're all alcoholics except for Sam, who's in recovery. And that's his, like, key to feeling like he has control. It's, like, really interesting dynamic stuff that is just there. And it's not real ham-fisted. It's just, like, perfect.
Yeah, that's such a good point. I'd never even thought about that. That show is really complex and amazing also in its simplicity.
There's one show I want to point out too, if you don't mind, on Thursday before we move to the final night. It's a show that was very little remembered. It ran for 2 seasons, but they were half seasons. It was a mid-season replacement and then a summer series. So it aired 2 seasons in the course of 1 calendar year. It's the only show that ever did that. And it was a replacement show on NBC called Grand.
Okay.
And it was sort of in the tradition of Soap. It was like a dramedy, half hour. Bonnie Hunt is in it, Michael McKean, like amazing cast, no laugh track.
I'm obsessed with Bonnie Hunt.
I love Bonnie's probably my favorite person ever. Her, yeah, I love her.
Have you like interviewed her?
Yes, I've had her on the show, and her stories are unbelievable, and she's so nice.
She directed one movie with Minnie Driver and David Duchovny.
Return to Me. It's brilliant.
Which is like so underrated. It's so good. There is such an ease and like camaraderie and chemistry on that set, and you can tell it's because of her.
Yeah.
And she's also in it, obviously. But you can tell she's just like a vibe.
Yeah.
And I think I would be obsessed with her.
The best. Grand is very good. And yeah.
Okay, Grand. Okay. So that was Thursday.
Yep. Friday night. Final night. Probably being social.
Okay. So again, I just want to go on record as saying I am 13, 14, should be having a social life at this point, sort of, having sleepovers, probably be watching less Friday night television. I have to go on record and say, like, I really did not like Full House.
No, me either.
But my siblings loved Full House, and they were all younger than I was. They were like 4, 5, and 6 years younger because my parents divorced and remarried different people. So I always thought Full House was just not that clever and a little lazy, and I think Bob Saget is kind of like or may he rest in peace, was a genius, but was like not allowed to display any of that on the show. And so I kind of suffered through some episodes, and I know it's like people like will crucify me for saying this, but I really didn't love that. Nor did I like any of I didn't really like
the TGIF
Family
lineup.
Matters.
Yeah, well, they were sort of the first shot in multicam sitcoms becoming just for children, which is what happened in the 90s and the 2000s. Yes. They moved to Nickelodeon and Disney, and that's the realm of that. And Full House is really when that shift happened. It was like
playing to like a lower. Yes, I think that's absolutely right. I would suffer through Perfect Strangers. I thought Balky was kind of funny, but I was a huge fan of his from Beverly Hills Cop. I mean, like that one scene he's in, or two scenes, like literally stole my heart. And so I was always kind of like disappointed because I thought he had so much, again, more to offer.
But that show also, it's very good physical comedy, but Cousin Larry Appleton's almost like a Larry David precursor. Like, he was an asshole. Yeah. And everything that happened on that show was because he was like being a dickhead who was like just a jerk. And that was an interest. We didn't see characters like that on TV at that time who were just like dicks.
It's true. I guess I just wanted like a little more edge, and you're right that we were just not getting that on Friday night. And I felt the same with Just the 10 of Us. I could not stand Just the 10 of Us. I thought that lead character had zero charisma.
Bill Kirchenbauer. Yes, stand-up comedian Bill Kirchenbauer.
I feel so bad, but like I have to speak my truth.
He was playing the dad of actors that he was only 5 years older than in some cases.
It's like so classic. Yeah. My Friday nights when I was younger was really ruled by Miami Vice, and my parents were obsessed with Miami Vice, and I would try to like stay up to watch Miami Vice. It came on at 10, right? Yeah. It came on very late. And I think it may have been canceled by now.
No, it went till 92, which is crazy. Okay. There's a bunch of 80s shows.
So maybe I just didn't catch it.
It might have just not been on in the summer. It might have been for some reason. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So I was into Miami Vice. I definitely had a crush on Don Johnson. I immediately understood that like that sequence, that like intro sequence that Michael Mann did, whatever it was, felt very elevated. It felt like so different from other stuff that was on TV, and I was like very into it. I just thought like the whole style of it was just, that was like my intro to Michael Mann, obviously.
Manhunter's one of my favorite movies of all time, like Michael Mann from 85. Like, I love that. And have you ever seen the show Crime Story?
No.
Highly recommend this. It's Michael Mann. It's the only other show he did. It was during Miami Vice. It's basically Miami Vice Mad Men. It takes place in the 60s in Chicago and in Las Vegas, and it stars Dennis Farina. And it's about this 60s special crimes unit, and it's awesome.
Okay. Do you think it's available anywhere?
It's streaming. Ken? Yeah, it's streaming on Freevee and a couple other places. If you can't find it, let me know. I can get you some episodes. Okay. But it's two seasons. You'll be blown away by the actors in it. Like, it's all people who became like well-esteemed actors later.
You had me at Dennis Farina. I think he's like such a
He's the
treasure.
lead. Dennis Farina's the lead on a TV action show on a network, like a 60-year-old ex-cop. And he's amazing, but it's like, who would greenlight that?
Unbelievable. Yeah, so that was really Friday night for me. But I love that Michael Mann tip. That's great.
Yeah, awesome show. And he, actually, I had Paul Michael Glaser on from Starsky and Hutch, and he directed a ton of Miami Vice.
Yes.
Because Michael Mann was a writer on Starsky and Hutch at one point. Didn't
Mitch Glaser direct The Cutting Edge?
Yes, Paul Michael Glaser did that. He did The Running Man as well.
And The Running Man, the Arnold Schwarzenegger movie?
He came in. They fired the director who was way over budget, and they had Paul Michael Glaser come in.
So that's my week.
It's not as bad a week as you thought it was.
No, I mean there's highlights and lowlights, but that was the beauty of primetime watching. Yeah. There was anticipation. There were dry spells. There were like nights where you were just so psyched and pumped that you had waited. Some nights you couldn't believe that you would have to wait a whole other week to see the follow-up. Particularly if it was a to be continued, you just couldn't. I would go crazy. I couldn't believe it.
And I missed that. I missed having the week to ruminate. Like when Twin Peaks: The Return came out, I liked that it wasn't binging because I wanted that week to be like maybe and like think about it and anticipate it.
Totally,
which was pretty great.
Yeah. I love that. I used to love to watch TV that way, and my kids cannot understand it. They don't understand that at all.
Have you ever tried to show your kids any shows that you liked as a kid?
I was a huge Felicity fan. I've tried to communicate that to them. They kind of are into it. I was a huge My So-Called Life fan.
My favorite of all time.
Like, I will still watch episodes of that just thinking it's some of the most brilliant writing of that, like, adolescence that I've ever seen. They haven't gotten into that yet for whatever reason. I think it's like a little slow moving for them or something.
I could see that. It's also less aspirational, which I think kids are used to seeing shows about teenagers who are like wealthy or like more aspirational. It's so kind of matter of fact.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree. All these kids just look regular, except for Jordan Catalano, who just looks, he's exactly the handsome that you need. It is the whole point. But she's normal, and Rayanne is normal, and, they all just, Brian Krakow's normal, but you still love him, and I don't know. I just love that show so much. So those are definitely probably my two still go to. I think they're both on Hulu, and I'll still watch those.
And last tip before I let you go. Next time you find yourself in Los Angeles, if you're in South Pasadena, the My So-Called Life house and Krakow's house are right there.
Is that right?
They're right across from each other, and it's actually right near the house from Pee-wee's Big Adventure and the house from Pretty in Pink. They're all like in a 2-block radius there.
Oh gosh, that was location scouting back in the day.
Yeah. And so I went there and I was like, this is My So-Called Life houses.
It's just like your life, like flashing before you. That's so neat. That's so cool.
I was like, man, this is great. Well, thank you so much for doing this. I'm so glad.
This was so fun. It was so fun just to chat and like walk down memory lane. And it's like very rare that I don't have that many friends who went as deep in TV and movies as I did growing up. So like once in a while I'll find you and I'll be like, oh my God, we can talk all day long. This is so fun.
Please do.
Your knowledge is like so far surpasses mine, but like I really enjoy this. This is like
thank you.
So cool. So thanks for having me on.
There you go. That's Daniela. She is fantastic. Listen to the Hollywood Gold podcast. Next week is our Christmas episode, which I think you'll like very much. And then it's the year in review episode. And then we roll in to 2025. If you would like to email me, you can do so at ken@icanread.com. That should be working. If it's not, you can do so at kenread, R-E-I-D, tvgc@gmail.com or tvguidancecounselor@gmail.com. Also no longer on Twitter, but am on all the other social medias, mostly on Blue Sky now. If you're looking for a Twitter replacement, I'm enjoying it very much. I'm at Kenneth W. Reed .bsky and all the social thing they have there on that kind of convoluted long thing. But anyway, Not important. If you have a couple bucks and you want to become a patron or even just, gift me in the holiday season, you don't have to do that. There are much more worthy causes, but you can do so at patreon.com/TV Guidance Counselor, and I would be very grateful. And if you were $5 or more a month of a patron, you would have received a PDF of this week's TV guide, so you could have played along. And you get access to all the TV guides, and it's just a Google Drive with everything I've scanned. You get them all there. Or, if there's one you'd like me to scan, you can let me know, and I'll do my best to get that for you. But anyway, it's the holiday season, and I'll see you next week for a brand new edition of TV Guidance Counselor.
Looks like you got some kind of alternate universe in there or something.